The twinkling lights on the Christmas tree cast a soft glow across the living room, where I stood arranging gifts with practiced care. The room hummed with chatter and laughter, but I felt like a ghost drifting through the scene. My hands smoothed the wrapping paper of presents I'd bought for everyone, except myself, of course. I was the family's invisible glue, the one nobody thanked, the one who held everything together, but never got to sit back and enjoy the warmth. Nursing shifts, household chores, managing the messy tangle of bills and calls. I handled it all, quietly absorbing the constant weight, without complaint. My annual contributions alone topped $50,000, money I funneled into keeping this household afloat, yet no one ever saw it. No one asked if I was okay. Jennifer, my older sister, floated through the room like a golden aura, radiant and untouchable. She caught my eye for a split second and gave me that practiced, dismissive smirk, the one that said, "You're nothing compared to me." Our parents hovered close, their smiles wide but hollow, always ready to praise Jennifer's latest achievement while I stood in the shadows. The tension between us simmered beneath the surface, an invisible chasm that grew wider with every passing year. Yet inside me, a quiet storm was building. I knew things they didn't. I held the family's financial secrets, legal documents, the fragile threads that kept this house from unraveling. This Christmas felt different. The exhaustion was deeper, the invisibility heavier, but beneath it all, I was bracing myself. Something was stirring inside me, something that wouldn't let me stay invisible for much longer. I remember a Christmas from when I was just 10 years old, the kind of memory that sticks like a stubborn thorn. We were gathered around the dinner table, the air thick with the scent of roasted turkey and pine needles from the freshly cut tree. Dad was glowing, beaming with pride as he applauded Jennifer's school award. "That's my girl," he said loudly, eyes shining with approval. I sat quietly beside him, clutching my own report card, the one that wasn't quite as impressive. That night, Jennifer unwrapped a brand new bicycle, gleaming red with shiny chrome, while I got a hand-me-down, scratched and worn. Mom's voice cut through the excitement, cold and dismissive. "Jennifer's the family pride. She deserves the best." I swallowed the lump in my throat and told myself, maybe if I worked harder, maybe if I was better, they'd see me too. That moment planted a seed I didn't realize was growing roots deep inside me. Throughout our childhood, Jennifer was the golden child, shielded, praised, and adored, while I became the scapegoat, the one expected to sacrifice, to carry the family's burdens without complaint. Emotional labor, endless chores, money I quietly handed over. My contributions were the currency of my love for them, yet they never acknowledged it. I rationalized their neglect, told myself I was just the responsible one, the steady rock. But beneath the surface, self-doubt blossomed. I was determined to prove my worth, to earn their respect, unwittingly stepping into a cycle of exploitation that stretched into adulthood. Adulthood didn't break the pattern, it cemented it. Year after year, I poured my nursing salary into the family mortgage, bills, and Jennifer's extravagant whims. Last Christmas was a particularly sharp sting. I'd spent $200 on a designer handbag for Jennifer, a gift she wore like a trophy, flaunting it in front of the whole family without a word of thanks. At home, my fiancé David was my sanctuary. "You deserve respect, Kate," he told me quietly one night, holding my hands like they were fragile glass. His words were a balm against the constant dismissal, but I wasn't helpless. I had a secret weapon. Every dollar I'd contributed, every bill I'd paid, every favor documented in painstaking detail. Still, Jennifer dismissed me as overly sensitive, mocking me at family dinners with a cruel laugh. My parents, Robert and Linda, watched but never intervened, their favoritism clear. Michael, my younger brother, was mostly an apathetic bystander, sometimes sympathetic, but rarely stepping up. I tried to voice my concerns, tried to break through the wall of gaslighting, but their response was always the same. "We do this because you're family." Their words felt like shackles. The imbalance simmered within me, frustration building like a rising tide. Yet I clung to hope that one day my sacrifices would be recognized. Thanksgiving dinner was supposed to be a celebration, but it turned into something else entirely. Jennifer announced her promotion to a managerial position, basking in applause like a queen taking her crown. I'd just come off a double nursing shift, exhausted but proud. I quietly mentioned my new nursing certification, hoping for a sliver of recognition. Jennifer cut me off with a sharp, sarcastic, "Oh, that's cute, Kate." The room chuckled awkwardly. The warmth instantly drained. Mom and Dad exchanged looks, but no one stepped in to defend me. My cheeks burned with humiliation as I retreated inward, swallowing the hurt. Maybe I'm just too sensitive, I told myself over and over, trying to dismiss the sting. Later, I overheard Jennifer whisper to Mom, "Kate's always been the responsible one, but nobody cares." The words echoed in my mind like a cruel echo, a subtle but public blow witnessed by the extended family. It planted a seed of doubt, a whisper that maybe my place in this family wasn't what I thought it was. The weight of invisibility, the sting of dismissal, crushed something inside me that night. But beneath the hurt, a flicker of something new, an ember of defiance, began to glow quietly in the dark. Jennifer's temperature rose the moment she sensed my quiet resistance. It was subtle at first, a slight narrowing of her eyes when I hesitated to agree, a clipped tone when I declined a financial request. But soon, the atmosphere around me grew colder, sharper. Rumors began to thread through our circle like poison. "Kate's always been jealous and ungrateful," someone whispered to a mutual friend. The words echoed back to me in hushed conversations and sidelong glances. I noticed friends I once shared laughter with now sidestepping me, their smiles brittle and half-hearted. My phone's silence became deafening. At a family brunch one sunlit Sunday, Jennifer's gaslighting struck with surgical precision. I tried to express how I felt overlooked during the holidays, how my sacrifices seemed invisible. She cut me off with a venomous smirk. "You always make things about yourself, Kate. Maybe if you stopped playing the victim, people would actually listen." Her words stung, but what hurt more was the silence from my parents. Robert's gaze flicked to Jennifer with approval, and Linda's lips pressed into a tight line, avoiding my eye contact. The unspoken message was clear. I was the problem. Their tacit alliance emboldened Jennifer's flying monkeys, our cousins and family friends who parroted her narrative. At gatherings, I was met with cold nods and pointed looks, whispers that pricked my skin like needles. Michael, usually indifferent, now seemed to distance himself, caught in the gravitational pull of Jennifer's orbit. I felt the walls closing in, the quiet suffocation of isolation. My voice, once steady and hopeful, grew smaller, swallowed by doubt and exhaustion. Yet beneath the weight, a fragile ember of defiance flickered, refusing to be snuffed out entirely. I remember sitting alone that evening, the house humming with distant laughter and clinking glasses. The familiar ache of invisibility settled deep in my chest, a hollow pain sharpened by betrayal. But in the dark, I whispered to myself, "This isn't who I am. I won't be erased." Even as the world turned against me, I clung to the fragile hope that truth might yet find a way to break through the smog of lies. Determined, I arranged a meeting with Jennifer and our parents, insisting David come along. His steady presence was a quiet anchor as I laid out what I'd long kept hidden: the detailed records of my financial support, the hours spent managing bills and care, the emotional labor that glued this family together. I spoke calmly, trying to bridge the growing chasm with facts and vulnerability. "All I want," I said quietly, "is acknowledgement, respect, fairness." Jennifer's eyes narrowed, her smile cold and dismissive. "You're twisting facts," she said smoothly. "We've all made sacrifices. Don't act like you're the only one." Her words were a wall, impervious and sharp. Linda tried to mediate, but her voice was thin and hesitant, casting doubt on my concerns as overblown. Robert sat stiffly, his silence louder than any support. The meeting crumbled under the weight of their denial and dismissal. As I left that room, Jennifer's final barb echoed cruelly in my ears. "Maybe if you weren't so needy, people would like you more." The sting burned deep, a reminder that rational dialogue was useless against entrenched favoritism and manipulation. My hope dimmed, replaced by a heavy ache of defeat. Yet beneath the hurt, a quiet resolve began to harden. If words couldn't break the silence, maybe actions would. The next family gathering, the 4th of July barbecue, was meant to be a celebration of freedom and joy. Instead, it became a battleground. Jennifer seized the moment to publicly joke about me, her voice loud and sharp over the crackle of fireworks. "Look at Kate," she said, laughter dripping with cruelty, "always living off everyone's kindness like some charity case." The words landed like stones, sinking into the soil of my dignity. Neighbors and family friends nearby exchanged uncomfortable glances. The warmth of the summer night twisted into a cold, heavy weight pressing down on me. David stepped forward, his protective instinct flaring. "That's enough, Jennifer," he said quietly but firmly. Before tension could escalate further, Robert's voice boomed, cold and authoritative. "David, mind your business." The dismissal was a blow, a clear message that my support was neither welcome nor valid in this family hierarchy. The humiliation prickled my skin, the social damage spreading like wildfire. But Jennifer's cruelty wasn't confined to public barbs. Later, she leaked false rumors that my nursing license was under review, an accusation that threatened to unravel my professional life. The damage extended beyond our family, touching my reputation in the hospital where I worked. Whispers followed me down the hallways, colleagues casting sidelong glances. Even Michael, the apathetic bystander, witnessed the deliberate dismantling of my standing. The campaign to undermine me was complete, emotional wounds deepened by tangible financial and professional harm. Christmas approached, a time I once treasured despite everything. In a last act of goodwill, I offered to pay for the entire family Christmas dinner, a gesture meant to bridge the widening gulf. I told Jennifer directly, "Please come with an open heart. I want us to heal." Her response was colder than the winter wind. "I have plans," she said, dismissing me with a mocking smile. "That's pathetic, Kate." The sting of rejection was sharp and final. I tried to voice my needs again, steadying my voice despite the ache. "I want respect, acknowledgement, fairness. Is that too much?" Her refusal was a clear line drawn in the snow, a boundary I was no longer willing to ignore. The family's greed, entitlement, and cruelty had overtaken any shred of unity we once had. In that moment, the fragile hope I clung to shattered, replaced by a fierce clarity. This was the end of my attempts at peace. It was time to stop being invisible, time to stand tall, even if I stood alone. The fallout hit me harder than any blow I'd anticipated. My attempt to bring our fractured family to the table, to shine a light on the truth of my sacrifices, crumbled before my eyes. Jennifer took the opportunity to twist everything I said, painting me as a desperate, attention-seeking troublemaker. Her words slithered through the family grapevine like poison. "Kate's just fishing for sympathy, making a scene where none exists." The sting of that accusation, so far from the truth, sank deep and left me gasping for air. Even Michael, my brother, who'd shown the faintest glimmers of understanding in the past, now sidestepped me with averted eyes, as if my presence was a burden he didn't want to bear. Linda, my mother, who I'd quietly hoped might see through the smoke and mirrors, shocked me with her cold dismissal. "Kate?" she said one evening, her voice tinged with exhaustion but also frustration. "Family harmony is more important than your constant complaints. We don't need more drama." The words crashed over me, heavy and unyielding. I wanted to scream, to tell her that I was the one carrying this family through every financial storm, every emotional breakdown. But instead, I swallowed the pain, feeling the walls close in tighter around me. The isolation was suffocating. I was the one who had always been the glue, yet now I was discarded like a splinter, sharp, unwanted, and easily ignored. In the quiet moments, doubt gnawed at me relentlessly. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe my needs were too much, my voice too loud in a family that valued silence over truth. The crushing weight of betrayal pressed down on my chest, and I felt myself slipping into a place where hope seemed impossible. But even as my spirit wavered, David's steady presence was an anchor in the storm. He never wavered, never let me forget my worth. "You're not alone," he whispered, his hand warm around mine, "and you're more than this family's shadow." His faith in me was the only light in a room darkened by rejection. That night, lying awake as the house settled into uneasy quiet, I made a solemn vow to myself. No more silent suffering. No more invisible martyrdom. Continuing on this path, trying to please a family that refused to see me, would only lead to more pain. I would have to find a new way, one that didn't rely on their approval, but reclaimed my story on my own terms. I was done waiting in the shadows. It was time to step into the light, even if it meant standing alone. Christmas morning arrived like a merciless spotlight on everything I'd been trying to bury. The living room buzzed with the usual festive chatter, but beneath the surface, the tension was thick and electric. I watched as Robert handed Jennifer a lavish gift, a diamond necklace that sparkled with a cruel opulence under the tree's twinkling lights. The gleam of envy burned in my chest, sharp and bitter. When I unwrapped my gift, a generic scarf, the disparity cut deep, a silent but brutal reminder of my place in this family's hierarchy. Later, during the gift exchange, Jennifer's voice rose above the din, loud and mocking. "I can't wait to inherit the family fortune," she crowed, eyes flicking toward me with a cruel grin. "Unlike some people, I don't just contribute a few meager dollars and expect applause." Laughter followed her words, hollow and echoing like a knife twisting in my gut. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a financial statement alert. I glanced down, heart plummeting. This year alone, I'd quietly covered $60,000 in family expenses, every cent unacknowledged, every sacrifice invisible. Overwhelmed, I sought out Mom later, hoping for some acknowledgement, some sign of support. But when I showed her the numbers, her gaze was clinical, detached. "That doesn't mean what you think," she said coldly. "You're misreading the situation." The words crushed me. Then, the final blow came. Jennifer, with a venomous smile, publicly accused me of stealing family money right there, in front of relatives. The room fell silent, the shock so palpable, it felt as though time had stopped. My mother's legs buckled, and she collapsed to the floor, her face pale and stricken. The weight of humiliation and betrayal pressed down on me, crushing my world into shards. In that devastating moment, something inside me shattered. The tired, exhausted woman who had borne years of pain and silence broke apart, leaving behind a raw, fierce core burning with a new fire. The victim was dead. In her place stood a woman who refused to be broken any longer. The air around me crackled with a cold clarity. I was no longer willing to be invisible, to be the family's scapegoat. This was my breaking point, and from it, a fierce resolve was born. The fight was just beginning. Alone in the quiet sanctuary of my bedroom, I let the floodgates open. Memories surged through me like a relentless tide. The unpaid bills I quietly covered, the endless emotional labor, the relentless dismissal that had defined my existence. Each recollection was a fresh cut, raw and aching, but beneath the pain, a sharp, clear anger ignited. I could no longer carry this weight in silence. The pattern was undeniable. Jennifer thrived by exploiting me, and our parents enabled her cruelty, shielding her from accountability. I traced the years in my mind, every moment I'd bent to their will, every sacrifice I'd made in the name of family. The realization struck like lightning. I had been conditioned to invisibility, to self-sacrifice at the cost of my own worth. But now the question shifted from, "Why me?" to a powerful declaration, "Enough." The words echoed in the stillness, a mantra that steadied me. I would no longer be the background, the overlooked caretaker, the silent martyr. I was done disappearing. A newfound clarity washed over me as I recognized the hidden weapon I held all along, the meticulous records of financial support, the legal documents, the knowledge of the family's fragile financial foundation. This secret power was mine to wield, and I would use it to reclaim my dignity. The pain transformed into strength, the anguish into purpose. In this moment of awakening, I vowed silently, "This ends now. I will never be invisible again." Later that night, David and I sat together, the weight of the day heavy but the fire in my heart burning bright. I shared everything, the betrayal, the humiliation, the searing clarity that had just taken root. He listened, his eyes steady and unwavering, offering the kind of understanding that feels like safety in a storm. "You have to be strategic," he said softly. "This isn't just about anger. It's about precision. You need undeniable proof and the right moment to make them listen." I nodded, the plan forming in my mind. "I'll expose everything," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "At Christmas, when everyone's watching, when there's nowhere to hide." The thought sent a thrill through me, a blend of fear and fierce determination. We talked late into the night, mapping out the steps, the risks, and the potential fallout. David's calm logic was a balm, helping me channel my pain into action. The first move was cautious, but deliberate. I reached out quietly to a trusted family attorney, exploring the legal boundaries of what I could reveal without jeopardizing myself. Each conversation, each step, felt like reclaiming a piece of my shattered identity. My posture shifted, no longer defensive or reactive, but poised and strategic. I was no longer the silent victim, but the architect of my own reckoning. With David's unwavering support beside me, I embraced the role I was born to play, the woman who would no longer be erased. I sat at the kitchen table late into the night, the hum of the heater mingling with the rustle of papers and the faint ticking of the clock. The weight of years spent invisible pressed down on me as I spread out bank statements, receipts, and text message logs across the scarred wood. Each document was a thread unraveling the tapestry of quiet sacrifice I'd woven for this family, a tapestry they'd taken for granted without a single thank you. As I traced the numbers, the picture grew clearer. Robert's pension didn't even cover the mortgage by itself. Without my monthly transfers, the house would slip through their fingers. It was a truth I'd long suspected but hadn't allowed myself to fully confront. Jennifer was living in a fantasy built on my back. Her designer bags, dinners out, and non-stop demands all paid for by me. The thought soured my stomach, a bitter cocktail of anger and exhaustion swirling inside. Then there was the emotional labor, the invisible glue holding them together. I had access to their medical records through work, a responsibility I'd never abused until now. But it dawned on me how much power that knowledge held. Jennifer never suspected I could pull the strings of their health secrets if I chose. I thought of the nights I stayed up, navigating hospital bureaucracy just to get Mom's medications right, or quietly managing Dad's confusing paperwork. No one acknowledged it. No one noticed that I kept their world from crumbling, piece by piece. My phone buzzed with a message from my attorney, confirming that exposing financial mismanagement was legally sound and protected under whistleblower statutes, an ironclad shield I hadn't dared to wield until tonight. The law was finally on my side. As I organized photos of receipts alongside bank statements and text messages where Jennifer barked demands or schemed to manipulate our parents, I felt a shift inside me. This wasn't just paperwork, it was a weapon. Every figure told a story of exploitation. Every message revealed a lie. The family's facade was fragile, and I held the keys to shatter it. I could feel my confidence solidify like concrete setting in my veins. No longer would I be the silent martyr, the one who gave and got nothing back. I had proof. I had power, and I was ready to use it. The realization was as terrifying as it was liberating. They depended on me more than they knew, and I was done being their invisible safety net. The quiet nights spent drowning in their financial chaos weren't a burden anymore. They were the foundation of my plan. A slow, cold fire kindled inside me, burning away years of pain and self-doubt. I was not just a caretaker. I was the family's linchpin, and now I would make them see it. In the days that followed, I adopted a carefully neutral mask, my face a calm lake hiding the storm beneath. I backed up every shred of evidence onto encrypted drives, hidden in places only David and I knew. I reset passwords on every shared account, locking Jennifer out without raising suspicion. The morning after the password changes, I watched her try and fail to access the family checking account, frustration flashing behind her practiced smile. No one noticed the subtle shift, the tightening noose around her privileges. In quiet moments, I whispered plans to David, who nodded with steady resolve, his support a fortress around my fragile hope. I rehearsed what I would say, over and over, balancing raw emotion with cold, precise facts. This wasn't a scream into the void anymore. It was a surgical strike aimed to dismantle the lies, brick by brick. The Christmas morning gathering was my stage, the perfect arena for the truth to explode into the open, with witnesses and no escape for their denials. I pictured the stunned faces, the shocked silence, and the fragile cracks in their polished facades. The stakes were higher than ever. The risk of backlash hung in the air like a storm cloud, but I could no longer live in fear of Jennifer's venom or my parents' silence. Each day, as the family carried on with their oblivious routines, laughter over holiday plans, the clinking of glasses, the casual banter, I stayed distant yet present, a quiet observer preparing to pull the trigger. The tension under my calm exterior tightened, a coil waiting to snap. Jennifer, perched atop her throne of entitlement, had no idea the foundations beneath her were trembling. I told myself to stay steady, to keep this secret until the moment was right. The calm before the storm was a fragile thing, but I held it tightly. My heart beat with purpose. Slow and deliberate, I was ready. One evening, as I sifted through bank records with a sharper eye than before, the ground shifted beneath me. There, buried in months of transactions, was a hidden nightmare, Jennifer's secret debt. It wasn't a small hole, but a cavern. Over $150,000 swallowed by credit cards, reckless gambling losses, and failed business ventures carefully concealed from Mom and Dad. My breath hitched, a cold sweat breaking across my skin. This explained so much. The resentment, the desperation behind her demands, the cruel mask she wore to hide her crumbling facade. My hands trembled as I stared at the numbers, the weight of this revelation threatening to topple the fragile balance I'd been maintaining. Jennifer's manipulations were no longer just about favoritism or control. They were about survival, and she was sinking fast. The family's financial stability was teetering on a knife's edge, and I held the blade. This twisted secret gave my fight a new urgency. The stakes were no longer just my dignity or my worth. They were about exposing a danger that could ruin them all. My mind raced as I considered the fallout, the shock, the betrayal, the inevitable collapse of the carefully crafted image Jennifer projected. I felt a surge of power mixed with dread. This was bigger than I'd imagined. That night, I shared the discovery with David, my voice barely above a whisper. His eyes darkened with concern, but also something fierce, an ally's promise. "This changes everything," he said, his tone heavy. "You need to be even more careful, but it also means you hold the ultimate leverage." The thought settled in my bones, cold and steady. I wasn't just fighting for respect anymore. I was standing on the edge of a reckoning that would shake the family to its core. I breathed deeply. The fire inside me sparked hotter, fueled by the knowledge that the truth I wielded could no longer be ignored. Christmas Eve arrived with a deceptive calm. I moved quietly, deliberately, like a shadow slipping through the family's carefully maintained illusions. Without fanfare, I stopped the transfers that paid the mortgage and utilities, an act that would ripple through the next days with quiet devastation. I sent formal notices to Robert and Linda, their faces sure to pale when the reality hit, but I made no move to explain. Yet, Jennifer's credit card limits shrank inexplicably, and her usual funds dried up like a well-run dry. She fumed, but confusion clouded her eyes. She didn't suspect me. Not yet. I blocked her access to every shared account, locking down financial control with a cold precision. At the same time, I alerted our family lawyer about the imminent disclosures, ensuring that when the storm broke, I would have legal cover. The house hummed with holiday cheer, oblivious to the undercurrents shifting beneath the surface. Bills went unpaid. The first cracks appeared. Whispered worries floated in quiet corners. The family felt the strain, but had no idea whose hand was tightening the screws. Jennifer's carefully maintained facade began to falter, but she looked everywhere except the source of her unraveling. As I watched the subtle chaos unfold, a strange satisfaction settled over me. For the first time, I wasn't the one bent under the weight of their neglect and greed. Instead, I was the catalyst, the one who pulled the curtain back on their lies. No one suspected the architect behind the disruption, and that gave me a grim, steady power. The family's fortress was crumbling, brick by brick, and I was ready to watch it fall, not with vengeance, but with the fierce clarity of truth finally seen. The game had begun, and I was no longer the pawn. Christmas morning arrived with a brittle quietness that felt both heavy and electric. The soft glow from the tree cast long shadows across the living room where our family gathered, each of us seated stiffly, the usual warmth replaced by an undercurrent of tension that prickled my skin. The air smelled faintly of pine and cinnamon, but beneath it lay the sharp scent of suppressed truths ready to erupt. Gifts were piled around the tree, carefully wrapped. Jennifer's gleamed with glittering paper and elaborate bows, while mine sat unnoticed in plain brown paper, a subtle but cruel reminder of how little I mattered to them. I held the folder tightly in my lap, the weight of those papers grounding me, filling me with a fierce calm. The lawyer began reading the will, his voice steady but formal, filling the room with the usual legal jargon that hid more than it revealed. I listened, my heart pounding, and then, just as his voice faltered over a clause favoring Jennifer, I spoke up. "Wait," I said, my voice clear and unwavering. The room turned toward me, surprise rippling like a shockwave. Slowly, I stood and opened the folder, pulling out my tablet and connecting it to the large screen mounted on the wall. The faces around me shifted, curiosity and confusion mixing with a rising apprehension. I tapped through the documents, bank statements, payment records, legal notices, all undeniable proof of my years of financial support, quietly covering over $50,000 annually of the family's mounting expenses. Then I revealed the hidden truth, Jennifer's massive personal debt and the lies that shrouded it, threatening to sink us all. I read aloud excerpts from text messages where her manipulations were laid bare, demands for money, threats to withdraw affection, and her relentless control over our parents through carefully crafted deceptions. Robert's face drained of color, his stern mask cracking for the first time in years. Linda gasped, rising to intervene, but I cut her off firmly. "The truth deserves to be heard," I said, locking eyes with her, my voice steady despite the storm bubbling inside. Jennifer's confident smirk faltered, twisting into shock and then anger as whispers flickered through the room. The extended family and friends gathered for the holiday watched in stunned silence as the power shifted palpably from Jennifer to me. I declared clear boundaries. No more exploitation, no more silence. "I will no longer be invisible in this family," I said, my voice carrying the weight of years of quiet suffering and newfound strength. The room was thick with tension, the moment ripe and raw, a champagne moment where justice, long delayed, finally popped and spilled into the open. In that instant, I wasn't just Kate, the overlooked caretaker. I was the woman who had fought back, who refused to be erased, and who demanded to be seen. The aftermath was immediate and seismic. Jennifer's carefully constructed world began to unravel before my eyes. Family members, who had long turned blind eyes to her antics, started pulling her aside with hard questions and incredulous stares. She made frantic calls to my parents, her voice dripping with false remorse and frantic promises to make things right. But every word sounded hollow, a desperate attempt to stem the flood of her own undoing. Robert and Linda, once her staunch defenders, exchanged worried glances, their enabling shields cracking under the weight of the undeniable evidence. The family lawyer warned Jennifer quietly but firmly about the legal ramifications of her hidden debts and reckless financial management, words that hung like a guillotine over her future. Jennifer's social circle, once vibrant and flattering, shrank rapidly as her friends began to distance themselves, wary of the scandal now swirling around her. Meanwhile, I stood firm, my resolve deepening with every passing hour. I refused to engage with her manipulative tactics, the love bombing, the apologies laced with poison, the gaslighting that had once rattled me. Instead, I maintained my boundaries, blocking her attempts at contact and leaning on David's steady support. Every step she took to spin her narrative collapsed under the weight of the facts I'd laid bare. The family's emotional and financial fallout reshaped the dynamics irrevocably. Those who had enabled now faced their complicity, and I was no longer the invisible one, but the catalyst for change. Jennifer's desperation escalated in the following weeks. She unleashed extended family members, the so-called flying monkeys, to pressure me, sending texts layered with guilt and veiled threats. She hinted at exposing personal aspects of my life, trying to fracture my relationship with David through lies and rumors whispered in dark corners. But I was prepared. I documented every incident, every message, every attempt to break me. Legal advice became my shield, deflecting threats with calm, measured responses that left her no room to maneuver. Her manipulations lost their potency as her isolation grew, the family beginning to see the sharp contrast between her venom and my quiet strength. Each failed attempt hardened my resolve and deepened the respect that quietly grew around me. Jennifer's last efforts to regain control, desperate phone calls, frantic messages, public outbursts, crumbled spectacularly, exposing her true nature to even her most loyal allies. The family, once divided by favoritism and silence, started to rally around a new reality. I was no longer a scapegoat or a silent martyr, but a woman who had claimed her rightful place. The isolation that encased Jennifer was complete, a testament to her own unraveling and my steadfast dignity. Months later, I stand in my own home, the air filled with peace rather than tension. The toxic web that once ensnared me has unraveled, replaced by clear boundaries and a new sense of freedom. David and I share a quiet morning, the trust and respect between us deepened by the trials we've faced. I finally feel safe enough to breathe fully. Contact with my parents and Michael is limited, but healthy now. No longer draining, but sustaining. Jennifer's reckless financial choices have forced her into restructuring and estrangement, a painful but necessary consequence. I reflect on the long journey, from invisibility and exploitation to empowerment and justice, knowing that the Christmas morning confrontation was painful but essential. For the first time, I feel truly seen, valued, and hopeful. The strength I found inside myself is no longer a flicker, but a steady flame guiding my future. I smile softly, the weight of years lifting as I acknowledge that my worth is no longer defined by others, but by the resilience I've forged through fire. The path ahead is mine to shape, unburdened and bright, a testament to the woman who refused to be invisible any longer.